All right, I have a great show today. I have with me Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, and we are going to be going over the truth that the mainstream media is not sharing with us in regards to Vladimir Putin, the Russian army, the Ukraine army, Zelensky, and much more. Thank you, Colonel, so much for being on today's show.
Stephen, great to join you. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So lots going on right now in the Black Sea. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that an order or a request went up the military chain to the Kremlin, or even possibly as high as President Vladimir Putin, giving this Russian fighter jet pilot permission to mess with a U.S. military asset, this Reaper drone.
Reaper, right?
Yep. And so wanted to know, is this Russia escalating tension between the United States, or is this just common when it comes to being a part or akin to a war situation?
So during the Cold War, we did this back and forth all the time. I mean, it was something of a Cold War. I mean, we were kind of doing things back and forth during the time that we were actually the United States versus the Soviet Union. This is not new. Since we've been at a new Cold War with the Russians, we've had Bear bombers penetrating U.S. airspace or near penetrating, where we've had to send up fighters to intercept them. We've had any number of Russian fighters antagonizing U.S. ships in the North Sea, and we're talking about buzzing the ships very closely, very dangerously. And so, I'm sure it went to Putin, but I don't think they think much more of it than anything else they're doing right now regarding just reminding the United States that they're not happy with us supporting Ukraine, and they're not. I think it's interesting that they decided to dump some fuel on the drone first. That's to me the symbol of a dog raising its leg on a fire hydrant. They did that purposely. It was what it was. Come on. And it is what it is. And so I think the American public needs to understand that, first off, that they wouldn't be doing this if they were losing. The Russians are not losing. The Russians are confident in what's going on. And this is just a little toss of the hat saying, yeah, we're doing well. Here you go. And look, I'm not pro-Russian. Don't be taking my comments as thinking that this is all good for the Russians. I'm simply explaining the behavior for what it is. And Putin's a thug. Putin has murdered reporters personally, as in like he killed the woman in an elevator in Moscow. So he's not a good guy. And don't be thinking that somehow I'm supportive of what they're doing. I'm simply putting in context what they did and why they did it yesterday.
Yeah, no, I hear you. If I tell the truth about the strength of the Russian army, I get called a Putin sympathizer.
Me too.
If I talk about Ukraine, they tell me I support Nazis. So I'm just trying to get to the truth.
I'm completely ambivalent to both sides. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so this is common with war. This is not anything that they're doing any extra escalation on.
No.
Okay. So
I don't think they saw this as it's clearly meant to send a message, but it's not escalatory at all. So
okay, so this is like wild animals marking their territory, saying back off.
Literally,
okay.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Now here's where it gets a little bit scary. Is this morning Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina went on the news and said that we need to take this very serious. This is a threat against the U.S. military, and that we need to start shooting down Putin's warplanes in international waters in order to send a clear signal to the Kremlin that the United States is dominant in this war. What are your thoughts on that?
So Lindsey's a neocon, and I'm not a neocon, and the neocons, like he and others, are always trying to get us into a shooting war. His comments are insane, literally insane. No rational person would start saying that we need to shoot down Russian airplanes in international airspace and be able to keep a straight face. That is literally escalatory and would get us into a real shooting war with Russia. One which, by the way, Stephen, we're not ready to take on. And let me qualify my comment first. We've depleted our global stocks of all material that we need for a war against Russia by giving it to Ukraine. By the USIS, I'm trying to think of the name, the Strategic Institute for International Studies, SI. I always get their acronym wrong, but they've done a study recently that said it's going to take us years to reacquire the needed stocks of weaponry to be prepared to fight a near peer. So we're not ready. Secondly, okay, Lindsay, we get into a war, then what? What are we going to do? What's the objectives for it? And this is the other thing I always get upset with politicians over. They want to get us involved militarily and then have no idea what the end game is supposed to be. That's not the way we're supposed to fight. Sun Tzu has a saying, I used it on Judge Napolitano's show yesterday: tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So Lindsay is talking about a tactic without any understanding of strategy. Clearly, he should have spent more time actually studying strategy than law, since he was a military JAG. Just saying, military lawyers aren't the best for strategy. They're great at saying no, or apparently getting us into war without understanding what does that mean. Tony Zinni, who is not a conservative, once instructed me, told me a story how he used to get called into the office. Tony Zinni was commander of Central Command under Bill Clinton, and he would always get called in. He told me the story once how there would be disagreements on something, and I think there were 6 events where Clinton wanted Zinni to do something and Zinni didn't want to do it. So sure enough, they basically Zinni would have to fly up on his airplane, go see the president, and they talk. And Clinton would say, "Can you do this militarily?" It's like, yeah, I can do that militarily. And then what? What are you going to do after that? What's the plan? Because that's always where things come unravel. So Lindsey Graham, again, being fastidious at best, idiotic at worst, is saying something that he has no understanding of the consequences of what he of the policy he's trying to put forth. That's how dangerous it is. So I'm sorry if my answer offended anyone in your audience, but that's the truth.
Yeah, no, that's why I have different people with different backgrounds on. It's because, again, I'm just trying to get to the truth here. Now, I'm sure that you're familiar with Scott Ritter, former UN weapons
I am.
inspector.
I don't know Scott, but I know who he is. Yes.
Okay. And I know that you know who Colonel Douglas McGregor is.
I'd love. Doug and I agree on most things about 80% of the time. I love Doug. Okay. So I respect him immensely by the fact his well, I don't always agree with what he says. I know his intellectual rigor is immense, and that he's put a great deal of thought into it. And I pay great attention to what he says.
Great. So both of them believe that this battle that's going on in Bakhmut is really important for both sides. Ukraine to symbolically show that they can hold this area and block the Russian Federation army from making their way further west.
Right.
On the same token, on the Russian side, now there's so much media attention for the Wagner group and the Russian Federation army to take down this area is big. What are your thoughts on the importance of this battle?
So I think everybody needs to take a step back and remember how the battle was portrayed. About 6 months ago, this was a meeting engagement where the Ukrainians were going to win. That was the big thing. Oh, yes, we're all set to win. And they haven't, and they're not, because when you just simply look at the number of forces involved, the Russians have an order of magnitude forces more available. I mean, this is simply a numbers game, and I'm appalled by the media types in the West and politicians like Lindsey Graham ignoring the facts for what they are. They cheerlead for the Ukrainians, and I don't think that's helpful. That's not helpful to the Ukrainians. It's not helpful to the American public to understand what's going on. Bakhmut was never going to be an enduring victory for Ukraine. And the reason I'm saying that is because they don't have the numbers. A handful of Leopard tanks would show up on the battlefield, a handful of hand-me-downs from the EU and NATO does not make a cohesive, effective battle force that can take on Russian armies. I mean, we're talking about literally daily artillery duels that see 30,000 rounds shot from Russia and maybe 2 to 3,000 in return from Ukraine. It just doesn't make sense. And this is what drives me nuts, because no one's reported accurately. I've been in the media talking about this. I was on a while back on an Arab TV station. I can't remember which one. And a British intelligence officer was saying, Bakhmut means nothing. It's like Bakhmut means a great deal, because it was first portrayed as a major hub of transportation, and now the Western media is saying, it's no big deal. It's like it means something, and at this point, it means essentially a victory during the third quarter of a football game. And I'm stealing Doug McGregor's analogy here, but Doug is correct. This is kind of the third quarter of a big football game, and you know the home team is not doing well, and the team that's coming in is going to wipe the once they get past this series of downs, and they're not going to make a first down. Bad things are going to happen when the Russians decide to move forward.
Okay, so Jesus is famous for saying, "What great general doesn't count the cost of war before moving forward?" So basically, you're saying, when it comes to bullets and bodies, the Russian army, the Wagner group, they just simply have the math and the numbers on their side.
They have the math and numbers, and they have the motivation and technical competence to do it. None of that exists on the Ukrainian side. Again, I don't mean to diminish the value and sacrifice and bravery of the Ukrainian soldiers, male, female, young and old. They've been doing an amazing job, but they are under trained, way under trained. They are under resourced. They have a lack of adequate tactical leadership that is not tied into a strategic plan. There is just, I'm looking at the raw numbers. I'm looking at the facts, which I know is often inconvenient to our politicians and the media, but the facts simply tell me that the Ukrainians will not prevail in the fight for Bakhmut, nor will they prevail in the long-term sustainment of the war without outside, as in U.S. or NATO addition of ground forces. It's just not in the cards. So it is what it is.
So from a strategy point, then would it make sense for them to then fall back, regroup, dig in, give a couple of days of building up artillery and ammunition, and then holding their ground again so Russia can't continue west? Or even go ahead.
I don't think they can do that. I think that they've so badly attrited their forces and resources, they can't even do that. Because right now, Zelensky continues to throw, uselessly, I might add, forces into the cauldron at Bakhmut. So those forces which could actually be used for a fallback and second line don't exist. I think once they are done at Bakhmut, once the Russians are done attriting the Ukrainian forces, it's Katie bar the door. They've got a free run to the Dnieper River. There's just virtually nothing that's going to be able to stop them, again, without outside interference or addition. I think that's what's going on right now. I think Biden wants to get us into the war because he wants us to be seen as a FDR type wartime president for his reelection. I think that's a political angle, which is not popular, but I believe that's what motivates Biden at this point. And secondly, I think that certain members of the EU, not all, want to see a larger conflict because they want to have Ukraine serve as a gas station and resource station for the EU. And that's, to me, this is where Doug McGregor and I break down and separate on our assessment. I think this is all about resources. This is all about resources for the EU. That's why EU is so devoted and wanting to have Zelensky fight this battle. They want the gas, oil, and rare earths that are contained in EU. Russia doesn't want a competitor. Putin does not want a competitor regarding someone who can produce as much or more gas and oil as he does. So, Doug has different opinions about why, but my why is it's all about resources. And that's why you see these larger players behind the scenes trying to push Ukraine to hold the line and Russia fighting so hard to maintain the resources and expand its control.
Yeah, he told me off camera, offline, that a lot of this has to do with countries' interests.
Of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And it
so
does. And this is where we have our interest too. And I've been taken out of context. I've said that, and I did say on Newsmax, because I'm a contributor, that Ukraine is important to us. It is, but not like we need to defend it. It's important by the fact that it's a community which has great resources, and what happens to Ukraine is important to the world because they are a breadbasket. They have resources. So of course we should be the ones leading negotiations to end the conflict, not trying to inflict pain and suffering on the people of Afghanistan by endlessly sending resources in with no hope of victory.
yeah. Well, that seems to be kind of the common theme. So let me pick up on that with my next question. So you had
Sure.
mentioned um, Biden wanting to be seen as a great wartime president. Do you think there's any part of this that he's just doing his best and this was heaped on him just like 9/11 was heaped on George Bush? Or is part of this to raise his popularity around the world and in the country as he goes into
Right.
what will most likely be a 2024 re-election campaign?
Let me answer that in two parts. First, the Joe Biden, I've testified before Joe Biden. The Joe Biden that I testified before and knew does not exist. I don't know what is going on with the man in the White House. That Joe Biden is mentally incapacitated. So anything we see, if my posit is correct, which I think it is, uh, everything that's going on to and with and around Joe is being put upon him. So everything is being put upon him, not just this issue, everything. He is simply a construct that's being controlled by the Obama folks behind the scenes, Valerie Jarrett and that sort of thing. So everything I see right now indicates that, yes, politically, I think Joe Biden has been told that your best hope to increase your popularity is by becoming a wartime president. I don't think Biden really understands what's going on around him any given time today. I think he's told what to do when he's told to do it. He's not really a president, but those around him who are controlling him do see the potential of him becoming a wartime president, an FDR type president, as something that would benefit his campaign. So I hope that was a clarified answer regarding how I see it.
Yeah. Okay. So I found you because of the Judging Freedom podcast.
Right.
And on there, Judge Andrew Napolitano has had two high up former CIA operatives on.
He has.
Yeah.
Yes, he
And
has.
both of them said whether Republican or Democrat, the CIA will feed the information the CIA wants to a sitting president. And so could it be possible that just like with inflation and the conditions here in the US economy, that President Biden is being fed false information that we are in fact winning, that Ukraine has a chance at winning? Is he maybe being fed a narrative even as a sitting president?
I'll go one step further to say yes, and so is probably DOD. We probably don't have time to go through the intricacies of the intelligence community, but both DOD and CIA feed information to the president. And in this case, I think both streams are saying the same thing, that we're winning. And I know how the CIA intelligence system works because I'm a CIA trained military case officer. I've been embedded with CIA. I actually ran an operation that was briefed when Jim Woolsey was director of CIA. One of my operations was briefed to President Clinton. I was number 4 of the top 5. I was running it. It was completely black. It was off the books. We didn't acknowledge it. It was an Army operation hidden within CIA channels, so I know how the system works. And I know from my experience, Stephen, that CIA will always brief what CIA believes is in CIA's interest. It has nothing to do with the truth. It has nothing to do with national security. CIA has become an entity upon it unto itself that answers only to itself, and CIA is going to do what it thinks it needs to do to sustain itself. So if they believe CIA, it's like an entity. It's they have a series of leaders who embrace this. If CIA believes it's in their interest to lie and tell the president what the president wants, they think the president wants to hear, they're going to do that. They do it often, and I would agree that accurately represented what's going on to the judge and to you. So
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Well, maybe on our next show, we'll go a little bit deeper into the intricacies because I think people find this stuff pretty fascinating. Now, one last question.
Sure.
Scott Ritter mentioned that Zelensky is still alive and the acting president because Putin is allowing it. I know you've mentioned on other podcasts that your intel group, your research group, has somewhat been putting together a list of who you think could replace
Doing our best to
Zelensky.
put that list together. Yes, we're trying to
Yeah,
figure it
yeah.
out.
Do you think he's going to be taken out, or do you think he'll just be removed and replaced with someone that is more in line with NATO or takes a better defensive strategy? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it'll be someone who is if Zelensky's replaced. Remember, Zelensky's had a lot of problems with his own government. A lot of folks have been fired for corruption. I think Zelensky is as corrupt as any of them. In my judgment, Stephen, this is a war of oligarchs. It's the Ukrainian oligarchs versus the Russian oligarchs. They're cut out of the same cloth. They all come out of the Soviet Union. It's like, okay, come on. It's like a mess. It's a mess they made. It's their mess. We should stay out of it. With that said, we're in it. And I think Zelensky's carrying the water for a lot of interest, as you pointed out, as we talked about earlier in the interview. And those interests are what's really going to drive the train here. So the moment Zelensky is no longer seen as someone who can drive and sustain the train to maintain those interests, he's going to be replaced. It's going to be someone that's within the current sphere of his influence, I believe, someone who would have good relations with EU, someone who's a good communicator, and someone who can be essentially able to pick up where Zelensky lives off. Zelensky is going to be dumped as soon as his usefulness is done. I mean, he's a comedian, for God's sake. He's not a real, he's not like some guy that's going to be held up as a long-term pillar of success by the Ukrainians. He's an affectation. And I do believe that the Russians are happy to have him there because he's not that effective. Stephen, why would you kill an enemy? It's like Adolf Hitler. There was this big debate. I'm not comparing him to Adolf Hitler, just saying, just in case people get upset. Near the end of World War II, there was all this debate about what to do about Hitler. Well, by 43, 44, it's like, he's screwing up. Why would we want to interfere with him screwing up? I think Putin has the same attitude about Zelensky. It's like he's continuing to do things which actually enhance the potential for the Ukrainian loss. Why would we interfere with that? So I do agree with both that I think he will probably be replaced. And I think Putin's allowing him to live because Putin sees advantage of keeping him alive. So there you go.
Okay, thank you. As we wrap up, will you tell my viewers about your Project Sentinel and then
Sure.
where they can hear more about you?
So projectsentinel.net is essentially a think tank we're creating, which is supposed to be focused on constitutional governance. Imagine that. Trying to go back to the Madisonian style of governance, trying to make sure that our institutions actually function within the Constitution, don't violate people's liberty like they do every day, just saying. And then obviously I believe in a strong approach to national security that is constitutionally based, that Congress has a much greater role in oversight and approving military issues such as we're involved in now. I don't think, Stephen, the American people fully understand what's going on, nor the dangers we're facing as a nation. So I think that's something Project Sentinel is trying to highlight. Also, I have a new radio show on the America Out Loud network called The Hard Truth. The Hard Truth of Tony Shaffer. We take on some pretty darn hard issues. We've got we had Andy Biggs on first show the day that he indicted Mayorkas, or one of the filed the impeachment charges. Had some great shows with Adam Baldwin, the good Baldwin, Adam Baldwin, Mother Animal from Full Metal Jacket, talking about Second Amendment stuff. So it's not your average everyday radio show. I think people would enjoy it and learn a great deal about the things we're talking about and those are at Saturday and Sunday at 11 o'clock on the America Out Loud network.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Well, we've been privileged to have you. This is Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Happy to be with you. Thank you.